So, hi everybody and welcome to the Unreal Engine 5 tutorial series for absolute beginners. This is video 102, and in this video we are trying to program a player switch. What I mean with a player switch is when we start our program, let me start this one. I want that when I press a button or an image or anything, that my player is switching with another character. For example, we imported in our last video the first person character. So I want when I press a button, I switch to the first person character. In my case, I press P and you can see I switching to the first person character. I press P again and I switch back. And this solution with this P pressing and with this level editor, with the level editor, I go here on top, I go to open the level blueprint editor, and this solution I have from YouTube, and I link you this one here. So this is the YouTube solution. I will link this in the description below, and you can see exactly this one I have done there. And this is one solution to demonstrate you can easy where is this one here? You can easy switch the characters. But this solution is a little bit, let's say, we will go one step further. This is a good solution for start. He explains this in less than 4 minutes, and that's very nice. So I will link this in the description, and then you can watch this one. And I will talk here on my side a little bit more, because this one he will explain. And what we will do is, we will not use the level blueprint, because the level blueprint is nice, but we won't use another solution, which is, I show you this one. I press here play, and you see I have here my widget, right? This user widget. You can see here my life and my attack. And I want that when I press here on the left side, I created here these two buttons. I made this bigger, and later you have to put in their images, for example character images, and when you press one of this character image you are switching your character. This is our goal. We want to control this with images, or you can still control it with a key pressed button. All right, so that's that. And this will what I want to also mention is there are many different kind of solutions. I will try to pick one solution, the very easiest, not the best probably, but it's very easy to understand. It gives you an idea how you can switch, but the easiest is probably the one which is showing on the other guy on the YouTube with this 4 minutes explanation, but this one is also very nice. So, and to go on, I have I can show you what we are going to do. We will code a little bit more. That looks much. I have here two alternatives. I have here an alternative with spawn and with teleport, which means I teleport my character just under the scene. I make it visible and then not visible, and then bringing back, so we don't need spawning and destroying actor all the time. And then I have a solution with spawning and destroying actor, and I will show you this alternative. They are similar. Just one node is using spawn, the other one is using teleport. There is still a little bit bug on my side, which I will fix during the next hours or so. But before I continue in this video, I will just explain what knowledge we need, because we need to talk a little bit about the player controller here. We already talked about how to create a player controller. You go here, just here, right click, and then you can create here in blueprint classes this player controller. That's nice and good. And then we can set this player controller at the start here, or here in project settings. You go here to project settings, you go down, you go to maps and mobs, here maps and mods, or what is this? Modes, yes. And then you can set here the player controller. And important knowledge is here, this player controller setting in Blueprint is a little bit, let's say, strange. Not strange is, I mean, it is strange because you set this player controller, and this player controller, to change this player controller in Blueprints is not so easy as I thought, because I thought, okay, we have here a player controller, later I create my player controller like I did here, and then I create here another player controller, and then in Blueprints I can change it just with casting to another player controller, and that's actually not so the case. That's the problem. We can't, or perhaps I miss something there. I hope you are better than me and you can change this in Blueprints, this player controller, not here. I mean, not here at the beginning. I mean, during gameplay. This is another story. So at the beginning, I can play it too, change it to just what I want, what I created. But I want to change the player controller when I started the game. Now you see on the right side, my player controller is now the first, which I set up here on the right side. But now I want to change the character. Let's say I press again P, and now I want to use another player controller. And this is in Blueprint a little bit more complicated. And that's why I said, okay, that in C++ I know there works with overrides of the gameplay, game mode overrides of the player controller class. There we can do this, something like that. But we have not here C++, and I make a beginner video, which means we use another solution, which is also very good, I think, but it's a little bit against, at least when we read all-time player controller, it's a little bit against the player controller. What I mean with that is, player controller means you are trying to control your character and you're trying to implement the controls, right? And what are controls again? Let's watch this again. I open up my character. This is my player character. And when I go to the event graph, and here, this whole block I mark, this is when you create a new game. This is what is provided. And this is all this inputs, what you have from start, right? So this player controller things. I mean, this character controls. And actually, this one should be normally set in a player controller, normally, because that's why it's called player controller. You control the player with the inputs. But in the many templates for single player, the solution is they are using the character and they are implementing the character inputs directly there. So like when you create a new template, all time the character has the inputs and not our player controller, which is also created here. The default player controller is called this one, the player controller. This is the default, and when we open, oops, not this one. When we open up now this default controller, it's not even opening up. It's anyhow probably inherited from C++ or something like that. So, and that's why I created here my PC, my player controller myself. And yeah, so let's continue. What I wanted to say was, let me go there again. Where is this? Yeah, so you see the character has now all the inputs. And we already talked a little bit about this one and said this is good or bad, depends on the game. If you make a single player game, nobody cares if the input is on your character or it is on the player controller, because both works fine actually. And there was a discussion, what happens if it's a multiplayer game? And many say on a multiplayer game that can cause problems, because in multiplayer games there are not only one player controllers, there are many player controllers, and the character can be destroyed. That means, but the player controller will not destroy it. Only the character get destroyed. And that means your player controller can possess then a new character. And yeah, something like that. There are thoughts about this one, and then some discussed in forums. It is good to put them in the player controller. Some say it is good still keep them here in the character. And the solution for us as a beginner. We are a beginner. We are not advanced. We are not going to multiplayer right now because we won't try to understand this. We are keeping this now at start in our characters. And the reason for that is like I said, it is in Blueprints, it's a little bit problematic to create here a player controller. You can create one, but assign it only at start. And this player controller is used then most all time, right? This is the player controller which can't be destroyed. Your character, yes, your character can be destroyed, killed, and whatever, but your player controller is all time active as long this map is active where you are, or something like that. And that means if we want to change this one, this is a problem, so I have still not found it. And the easy solution is just keep the player controller, what we will do, and use the character inputs, and we will use there a special node then. And the special node is actually not so special, but as a beginner we have to learn it. And it's the node called just, let me see if I find it here. Yes, this possess node here in this big example. This possess node means you can specify a character which you want possess, and this possess node will target is a controller and will assign a controller to this character. So here in this example, when you watch this video, then here we want, for example, possess my character here. Let me click the other things a little bit away so we get not here distracted. So when you want, for example, possess now the character, you just say to this possess node, okay, character, I want possess you. I connect this one to my character. Of course, you need a reference to your character which you want connect, and then you say which player controller you want to use. Here, this possess asks for a player controller, and I said we are using only one player controller which we are set at the start. In my case, I set here PC player character. That was the start point. I created this one, and then I set this in project settings in maps and mods. This is the player controller which I'm going to use. Actually not this one, PC, this one is the one. I changed this probably. So this one is the player controller which I'm going to use, and now I want to use this one. So, and also important is you set the player controller with your game mode, because the game mode is all time taking this one, and then you have this one. So let's continue a little bit, and we can see, okay, I don't need to think much, which means I just get all time this get player controller 0. This get node here, get player controller 0, will all time get this player controller, which is here. So I don't care, okay, connect it here on top, I connect it here on bottom. It's all time the same player controller, but what changes is the character. So you can see here I use the Infinitive Warrior, the character changes, and the inputs of the Infinitive Warrior are this one. And in this version I say I possess now the first person character. The player controller is just possessing the controls, but the real controls are in the first person character. All right, and you can see it here. These are the controls for the first person character. So, and this solution is very handy, because now you can program all your character inputs directly in your character. Normally it is a good thing to have this one. Okay, perhaps it's also a good thing. Let's say this one, not a good thing, but also a good thing, because now the character has its own controls. And yeah, and it makes actually life also easier for beginners, because now we have not to think much. We use one controller. This is this player controller. There's nothing in. This controller is just here to process, but we still can, of course, let me open this one here, still code some coding special things, and so because this controller is still possesses all these characters later. And only we have no controls in it. The controls are made in the character itself, which should be normally here. So that's the story. A little bit. I hope it was not too confusing, but actually, yeah, when we get a little bit better and start a little bit more in multiplayer, then we will understand probably the real difference about local controllers, player controllers, and so on, a little bit more in depth. But we will try to understand now at start. Okay, we need only one player controller. Okay, we want only use the controls in the character, and that's it actually what we have to know. And all this thing what I explained here was just that you so understanding why we make this at start. So later this will probably change with multiplayer. And yeah, because one reason why this can change is probably, yeah, if you set up some controls with any other codes which is server relevant, then you don't want, of course, this one running on, I don't know, in your player character. Something like that, which must run on server or something like that. Okay, anyway, this is there is much to talk. I show you this in the next video when we set up this one. But till there, watch the other video, which I will link here in the description with this short video. He is really explaining it in a fast way. The only problem is with this, with his solution, it's a level blueprint, and yeah. And he is not referencing this reference use cases and all the other things. But level blueprint is okay too, but in most cases not all time good, but it's useful when it fits your games, of course. All right, with that said, I think I stop here. I talked much. If you have any questions or any complaints like all time, write it in a comment, and see you in the next video. Good luck.